Serious, as a kid, what was the creepiest, most WTF thing you ever noticed about another kid's family? One of my good friends in elementary school, 1st through 5th grade, had a deadbolt on the inside of her bedroom door. She also had a phone in her closet that she wasn't allowed to use. It was a second line and had a different phone number than the main house phone. The Bible on her bookshelf was full of money, $20s and $50s tucked between the pages. I didn't realize what this all meant until I was much older. Her father was very abusive towards her mother. Not the kids, though. Just the mom. My friend's room was the safe room. Mom would lock herself and the kids in there when he got in one of his moods. The phone was to call for help. The money was in case they needed to run. That is heartbreaking. I went home with a friend one day after school and she explained that her dad liked it quiet in the house. Okay. So we get there and the house is silent. I have to explain, she had 9 brothers and sisters. And in this tiny, 3-bedroom house with 10 kids, it was completely quiet. Their dad is in the recliner, one of only 2 chairs in the house, and he's just chilling, smoking a cigarette. We were in there to get a game and play it outside. 2 of her brothers started jostling each other and bumped into a cabinet. Their dad looked at them and held up his cigarette, and they ran out of the house. We followed right after them. Shannon always wore long sleeves. That didn't really raise a lot of flags, there were plenty of Mennonite families around. But one day her sleeve slipped up, and I saw a lot of small, round scars on her arm. It was a long time before I realized they were scars from cigarette burns. And that she had hundreds of them. They kept everything in a jar. Everything. Cereal. In a jar. Money/credit cards. Pocket jar. Dirty laundry. Large jar. They even kept some of their smaller jars in jars. Love that in the middle of this abuse campus, this is here. Right? Eccentric, sure, but not the horror show a lot of these stories are. Sophomore year of high school, I was invited to one kid's apartment to work on a school project. His house had no furniture, just a single mattress, and was a complete mess. Giant stack of dirty dishes, etc. While I was there, the guy nonchalantly mentioned his only parent, his mother, had left to visit family in Korea 2 years earlier, and he'd lived by himself since then. She just sent him money each month for food, and paid the bills remotely. Considering he must have been 15 years old, I was kind of thinking WTF. But it seemed like he was doing fine, so I just moved on. I know a guy who lived alone since he was 15. His parents divorced, his dad went to another country and started a company, and his mother married again and went to live to the new husband's house. He stayed in the old house and they both gave him money, they were really rich. He turned out really responsible. He finished school and college and now is currently the CEO of his father's company. I was staying over at a friend's house during the summer. We were like 11 or 12 and he told me he was going to shower. I told him cool, I'd stay and play PlayStation, no biggie. A little while later I hear multiple people laughing coming from the bathroom down the hall. Later on both his parents and him come out all in towels. I was confused, but asked him afterwards what the laughing was about, and he said his dad accidentally peed on his leg in the shower, so this dude just took a shower with his whole family and his dad peed on him. It was definitely a WTF moment. Also they weren't poor or anything to warrant sharing showers. They lived in an absolutely massive home that had like 6 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an in-ground pool, the works. His dad peed on him. Any other notes I need to take? The nail room. Small cupboard under the stairs that had nails stuck to every surface. Like the pointed end pointing into the room. Even the inside of the door was the same. It reminded me of an Iron Maiden torture device, but not as tight fitting. Family were completely normal. My friend is completely normal. No weirdness or anything. He doesn't know why they had the nail room either. Just always remembers it being there. The jokey? Don't put itching powder in the Trunchbull's gym knickers. They aggressively tried to take me to their church and ask my parents shit like, do you know your purpose in life? Do you want your children to grow up and be corrupted by the world? They later told my mom that they were Scientologists and we stopped talking to them. As a parent, I took the job of corrupting my children seriously. I didn't trust the world to do it right. His mom and dad lived together, and his dad's mistress and his half-brother lived in the basement. My sister's best friend is African and her dad had 4 wives. He brought 3 over from Africa, and he met one in America. The wives and daughters all worked in a braiding shop together, while dad and the boys ran a tire shop. They were very rich. My sister and her friend went on a road trip to Texas with some money the friend stole that she was supposed to deposit. I think it was about $15K. Nobody got in trouble when they came back. I don't even think they missed it. The wives all lived in the same high-rise building with their children. I was young and had to tag along with my sister sometimes. I remember if they didn't have something at one place, we'd go to another one and get some. Shit like milk, sugar, rice. The wives usually all hung out at the first wife's place and they drank about 3 gallons of Hennessy a day between them. When it got hot, no one was allowed to wear shirts at his house. I was allowed to go shirtless with my brothers until I was 7. I ducking loved it. But my family kind of had a general attitude that kids are just kids until they become boys and girls. My parents would bathe 3 of us in the tub at the same time when we were little, and they would put us to sleep together in the same beds. It wasn't until we hit age 7 or 8 that they started to separate us by gender and make sure we dressed appropriately for our sexes. The grandma just loved walking around nude. Naked grandma. A girl who always wanted to play house with me, which involved me being the daddy and her being the bad girl who had to pull down her pants as a punishment. We were like 7 years old at the time. Reminds of the time I had a friend who wanted to play house by pretending to get drunk and piss all over everything. Her mom was an alcoholic and all the kids were in and out of foster care. An unrepentant infestation of fleas. Not a flea problem. A full-blown infestation, meaning that people should not reside in the house until the issue was resolved. I only stayed a few minutes. I've experienced this. They apologized and wiped the fleas off the sofa so I could sit down. I got out as quick as possible, never went back. Had a family 2 doors down from mine, father and 3 sons. All the sons were well-known troublemakers throughout the town. In the late 90s, the youngest was arrested for sodomizing his baby stepbrother from his biological mom. Then in the early 2000s, the remainder of the family went on to use the house to manufacture drugs. The police came and arrested the father and the 2 oldest sons. The father bailed himself out and left his sons in prison. He liquidated almost everything he had, as well as the 2 sons, and disappeared. From what I understand, the 2 oldest sons are still in prison and the youngest is in some institute for sexual criminals. He liquidated his sons also? Nah, I understand, but geez, what a story. I knew a girl who could never come over to play. Monday she had piano and had to spend the entire day practice. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she had gymnastics. Wednesday cheerleading. Friday, tumbling, and Saturday and Sunday were solely for church stuff. She was never available to do anything, and she also way grounded if she got anything less than an A on her report cards or any feedback other than her being a star in whatever sport she was in. I wonder what happened to her. I never saw her again after middle school. I had a friend in middle school who had robotics, swim practice, track and field, and one other thing. This was in addition to normal school, and the lowest grade he ever got, and that was a C+, I believe. I originally thought he did this of his own volition, but recently he told me his parents made him do it. Still friends with him, and COVID gave him a lot more free time. They had 2 couches and 2 recliners, but the kids and their friends weren't allowed to sit on them. We'd get yelled at for sitting on them. They had bed pillows stacked under the coffee table that we had to use to sit on. I thought it was some weird thing about keeping the furniture new, but the dad would get crumbs and such all over the couch from his spot. And the animals, including the raccoon they had, were allowed on the furniture. Forget the furniture, a goddamn raccoon? Yep. Her name was Mel. At a Girl Guide event, I met a new girl and introduced myself. Later, after we'd done some things, she told me her real name was a different one. I was like, oh, okay. She asked me what mine was, and I said I had told her my real name. She absolutely insisted that I was hiding something, and there was some reason I wouldn't tell her my real name. Not that I had, like most children, not given a fake name. So odd. We were maybe 8 or 9 years old. Noticed this about my own family. No one was allowed over from outside the family. Ever. It made our family extremely mysterious to the whole neighborhood, and people told all sorts of crazy rumors about my grandfather and us and all the sinister things that must be going on in our house. The truth is, he had PTSD when people didn't know what to call it, and all loud noises could really duck him up. Couldn't trust other people's kids to be quiet, so no one was allowed over. Ever. Was totally normal to me, but it made everyone else sure I grew up in a murder house lol. I had a friend whose dad had a sensory problem to light. Just developed in his late 30s. So he had seizures regularly. But lights, TV, even opening and closing the front door a lot, letting light in, would set him off. All the lights in their house were very low wattage. I remember I was out back, and my friend opened the blinds, and his grandma was close them. Edit, the point I was making is that nobody was allowed over because we'd always go in and out, or turn lights on and off. I had a friend whose parents were divorced. Sometimes the sleepovers were at her mom's, sometimes they were at her dad's. Sleepovers at her dad's were less frequent, but definitely more interesting. On the walls were pages from magazines featuring photos of women, some of them in lingerie or swimsuits. He had a couple of mannequin heads with hair, and we'd style them with different accessories. I think he even gave one a haircut. He also had a wall of TVs, some color, some black and white, and all different sizes, all tuned to different channels. Usually we'd keep one thing on the biggest TV, and use some of the smaller ones to surf for something better. Sometimes we'd stay up late, and once we were confident he was asleep, watch softcore porn or Sue Johansson. The first memory I have of feeling sexual arousal took place on his couch. He also had 2 cats that would do tricks. He taught them how to sit and jump over your arm. Took me years to realize this one, but he also had a weed plant in his window. He just said it was a special plant that couldn't be grown outside. Pretty sure he was just a harmless burnout, probably did a lot of acid in the 70s. Nice guy, weird apartment. My mom and grandmother told me about a family that lived in the town where she lived. This was back in the 1930s and 1940s. The husband didn't work, but the wife did. During this time period, this was unusual. The father would whistle commands to his wife and children. Never called them by name, but used whistle commands. If they didn't respond fast enough, they would be punished. Must have been a nightmare for this family to live with this guy. My mom told me that this guy gave her the creeps. People strongly suspected that bad things were going on in that household which weren't visible. For example, wife and kids didn't appear to be physically abused, but that doesn't mean that they weren't. Every time my mom would see the Sound of Music where Captain Van Troop used a whistle to whistle commands to his children, it would remind my mom of this guy. A kid once walked into my 5th grade class with the bottom of a rubber slipper stamped on his face. His dad had used the slippers to slap him so hard, you can still read the brand on his face the next day. Anything happen after that? Nope, the teachers did their best to ignore the elephant in the room all day. I think they consider it an internal family matter. It's like that in India. Honor killing by parents is still a thing in India. Beatings are nothing. This family at my church I grew up going to in Kai. The parents looked identical. Like on The Simpsons with Milhouse's parents, but more alike. All of their children had severe learning disabilities, retardation, etc. I did not realize, until I learned about incestuous relationships, that they probably were closely related by blood. So I live in a small town also in Kai. There are these 3 siblings that walk around town. They all look exactly alike and have some very apparent disabilities and other issues. And apparently they are the result of incestuous marriage. Shit's more widespread than you think. There was a girl in my school, Lisa. She was kind of strange and most of the other girls didn't like her, but I thought she was nice. Her mom seemed really strange. Lisa invited all the girls in the class to a birthday party and only 3 of us showed up. Their house was like a scene out of Hoarders, stuff piled from floor to ceiling. They had a small dog that was tethered to a pole coming off their kitchen counter who looked like he was out for blood. He was growling and barking while baring his teeth the whole time. We had some boiled hot dogs for a meal, and instead of cake for dessert, her mom gave us apple slices. The whole party and the whole vibe in the house was just really weird. Her mom seemed to watch our every move. She never said anything, but just kind of sat and stared. She definitely had crazy eyes. Still, the 4 of us had fun despite everything, but it was easy to tell some bad shit was going on in that house. Lisa ended up going to my high school as well. We didn't have any classes together, but I'd talk to her when I'd see her. I wouldn't say we were friends, but we were friendly. I found out that about 2 years later, her mother was involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. It probably should have been done a whole lot sooner. Thankfully, their father was in the picture as well and they, Lisa had 2 sisters, grew up better than probably could be expected in those circumstances. I, 5 meters, had a girlfriend, 5F, whose parents were heroin addicts. Once we were hanging out at their place and her parents just stormed out in a hurry and left us alone and scared. Turns out that they had a dope appointment, or whatever. Update, I asked my mother for more info. Surprisingly, she didn't see that they were addicts before that incident. We moved to a different city shortly after that happened. Different reason. The last thing she heard is that the girl had to go to rehab with her mother. Ye remind me to get to know the families of the kids my children are keen to play with. I was in middle school and at friend's house, her elderly grandparents lived with them. I had started wearing bras, but my friend hadn't. I didn't think anything of it until one day I was at her house and her grandfather was giving me a hard time about wearing a bra, which is weird enough. My friend tells me that her and her sister can't wear a bra until they can show her grandpa that they can hold a pencil under their boobs. Yes, the parents knew, and apparently her mom and aunts followed the same rule. And this is when people cry about how good the old days were. It is an absolute ducking lie. There were just as many freaks back then, just no one talked about it or reported it. At 48 I can say I so welcome the new changes the older folks scoff at. I seriously see a new world after the boomers die off.